looking, throwing in the end zone.
There it is, a win for the ages. Korea, the fans want one.
Players don't get to pick the memorable moments of their career. They either have them or they don't. Hell, even the sport doesn't get to pick them. Bowling had no idea how big this was going to become. And to be honest, Gary Thorne on the call probably helped a lot.
Strike to claim it, a strike to claim it, and he got it!
That is right, I did it! That's number 5! Are you kidding me? That's right! Who do you think you are? I am!
I never gave much thought to what it meant. I just thought it was some cold-blooded shit to say to a motherfucker before I popped the cap in his ass.
On February 26, 2012, in North Brunswick, New Jersey, 49-year-old Pete Weber has a one-pin lead over the number 1 seed Mike Fagan in the 69th U.S. Open. This is the third shot in the 10th frame. Weber needs a strike to win outright. If he gets a 9, Weber ties with Fagan and they go into a roll-off for the title. If he gets 8, he loses outright. You probably know what's about to happen. Hell, I just showed it to you. At least the reaction to it. But you may just see this as a funny old guy saying something barely coherent in a sport that he probably shouldn't be taking all that seriously in the first place. And the thing is, you're not wrong. And watching it with zero context, it is funny. Hell, even in context, it's kind of funny. So funny, in fact, that people have been shamelessly mocking it for the past 12 years.
Who do you think you are? I am. All right, that's enough.
Higher seat.
Who do I think I am? You are. Let's go, Pete.
I am! I am! I am!
Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground.
Then he said,
Who do you think you are? I am!
Later on, Pete even got in on the joke himself and made this Muggsy Jeans ad.
Who do you think you are? I am!
That's why he wears Muggsy jeans. The only jeans comfortable enough to handle moves like this.
You have to remember, bowling is not nearly as popular as the 4 other major North American sports. You're not going to find posters of bowlers in kids' bedrooms. Not unless these kids are super cool. I've heard people who've never bowled a day in their life say this line. I'm not trying to shame anyone for making jokes. This is not something that is important to most people. And in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. People have enough things going on in their lives than to sit down and thoroughly research one specific person and their achievements. But if you want to know, here you go. Entering the 69th U.S. Open, Pete Weber was already a certified bowling legend. He was, and still is, known throughout the sport as one of the greats. 35 tour titles up until this point, 8 of them being majors, 4 of them being U.S. Open victories. How did the Pete Weber we see in this tournament come to be? The last name Weber may have rung a few bells for some of the people watching this, especially if you watch bowling in the 60s and 70s, which, knowing you, if you're watching this on YouTube, all of you have.
From St. Louis, one of the greatest, Dick Weber. Richard? Dick? Ready, thank you. How are you?
Dick Weber was a household name in the world of bowling. In 1958, Dick Weber, along with players like Don Carter and Ray Bluth, became the faces of the professional league, Dick himself being the biggest face of this group and the sport's biggest ambassador. According to sources like the St. Louis Sports Hall of Fame, his gentlemanly manner and extraordinary skill made him a crowd favorite. Weber was also known as a tireless ambassador of his sport and rarely passed up an opportunity to promote the sport. You have to realize, Dick wasn't just a star in the sport, he was the star. He was the bowling equivalent to an Arnold Palmer or a Joe Montana. The cool, calm, and collected man who kissed babies and donated charity after, winning the Piston Cup or something. However, Pete is not that way. When he came into the league in 1979, people looked to him to be the spitting image of his father when it came to how he played the game. And while he compared to Dick in terms of skill, being the youngest player ever to win 10 titles at 24, and then 7 years later being the youngest player ever to win 20, his attitude was something bowling fans were not expecting. To give you an idea of what Pete was like during his career, during a match against fellow professional Bill O'Neill, he was up by 33 pins going into the 10th frame. When he made his approach, you could hear the faint shudder of a camera go off. And, well...
Do not flash the camera in my approach. I'm telling you, don't do it. She flashes that camera again on my approach.
While they are totally different sports, the similarities in bowling and golf lie in the mental aspects. The concentration, wind-up, and follow-through all pass through the same areas of your mind. Hell, they even slow down the players' swing styles and analyze them live on TV in both sports. And this isn't just some speculation. Personally speaking, I played golf and bowling at the same time throughout my high school career, and continue to play them regularly throughout college. So why am I bringing this up? Well, I have a feeling I know where the PBA's mindset was back then. Bowling throughout the 70s and 80s was way bigger than it is today, with way more leagues and private clubs around the US. Not that leagues don't exist today, but it was much more common 30 years ago. The PBA was trying to maintain a high standard. The sport thought of itself more like golf, in the sense that it was about highbrow competition and manners. So when Pete went around yelling and screaming like someone out of the WWF, it wasn't taken well by the league. His antics would get him into trouble, and he was fined many times by the PBA throughout the 80s and 90s for rude gestures and audible swearing, and to my knowledge is the only bowler ever to say frick live on TV. I can't find any footage of him saying it back then, but here he is in 2021 announcing his retirement.
Who do you think you are? I am, and that's fucking right, I am.
While bowling, Pete always looked pissed off, like he's going to do something heinous to the pins down the lane. This is going to sound weird, but there's an old quote from the Civil War about Ulysses S. Grant by one Colonel Theodore Lyman that fits Pete Weber oddly well. Grant is a man of a good deal of rough dignity, rather taciturn, quick and decided in speech. He habitually wears an expression as if he had determined to drive his head through a brick wall and he was about to do it. I have much confidence in him. Or if an old Civil War quote seems too far-fetched for you, here's one from Sports Illustrated. While Dick has soft, sparkling, smiling eyes, Pete's are deep, brooding, and wintry. The TV cameras love to catch Pete from the front as he stares his big, hooking boomerang ball down the alley, his eyes open wide, almost demonically. Like something out of the weird movies, says Dick. This made him an easy target for fans to point and say, this is not the symbol of a star that we want representing the sport. People are often very afraid of new things being thrown in their faces, especially if it is very different to what they're used to. And I mean, Pete was and is very different to what people are used to. He says no words and makes rude gestures at the audience and at other players. He smoked cigarettes and struggled with alcoholism. There's an old interview with him saying that he would love to stop drinking, but not if he's told by someone else that he should stop.
Well, I guess, yeah, I am an alcoholic, but I'm not going to quit drinking because somebody else is telling me I have to.
Throughout his career, Pete would try every drug under the sun, and in the 80s, fell in love with the white stuff, often bowling multiple tournaments while coked out of his mind, and doing lines between games in the bathroom on tour. I'm not kidding. Pete said that between 1982 and 1984, he spent over $150,000 on a myriad of things, but mostly on cocaine, and was still winning, by the way. McCallum quotes Pete in his article saying, "There are some screwed up guys on tour, but I was more screwed up than any of them." During this time, he was also going through a divorce, and he was taking it really hard. He had a record of drunken accidents and would often mix Jack Daniels with Valium just to take the edge off. In March of 1984, Pete checked himself into a rehab center and tried to clean himself up. He credits a lot of his post-rehab life to his father and the relationship they had. While I can keep going, I recommend you read the Sports Illustrated article I have linked in the description, along with one by Sportsnet, a Canadian-based sports magazine. They are incredibly in-depth and go into more serious topics that aren't really appropriate for me to cover here. Afterwards, Pete did manage to get some major successes. In 1987, he would win his first career major, that being the 1987 Tournament of Champions. This period actually became his most successful era, being the PDW Vintage era. Between 1987 and 1993, he won 12 times, with 5 of those being majors.
Live in its 27th season, the Professional Bowlers Tour. We're in Atlantic City, New Jersey for the finals of the Seagram's Coolers United States Open. Here is our field of 5.
1988 was his first U.S. Open win against Marshall Holman, who at the time was at least in the running for best current player in the league. In the 6th frame, down 2 pins, Holman had to hit a 10-pin for a spare to keep up with Pete in the championship match. While the 80s was the difficult point for Pete emotionally and physically, the 90s was his professional hardship. Around 1995, his game took a major dip and was not making TV appearances, at least not enough to make any real money. This continued for an aggravatingly long period of time, so long in fact that he considered quitting the game outright. If you've ever hit a slump in sports or any skilled craft of any kind, it can become an Ouroboros of doubt and self-hatred. I mean, why can't you just put the ball in the pocket? It's not that hard. You're a professional. This thought process happens every time you miss a shot. This probably came at the worst possible time for the sport of bowling as we know it. Bowling was at its lowest point in history. In 1997, ABC Sports' contract with the PBA ran out, and they didn't renew it, and no one else picked it up. Bowling was old news, according to most people, and they just did not want to watch it anymore. Gary Callahan from Sports Illustrated from around that time said this: "If it hadn't been for Schenkel's much publicized farewell, most people wouldn't have known that the PBA series was still around. I would have thought it went off the air with Love American style." Is the predecessor to Happy Days, just to date that for you. So just to put this in perspective, bowling is for old people on Sundays with nothing better to do after church. So they for sure don't like the big loud man that says all the swears and does the large gestures. But back to the larger point, Chris Schenkel being the famous ABC sports commentator that covered bowling for the majority of its run. This was his final broadcast.
Walter and I did the first Olympic Games together at Squaw Valley for CBS in 1960.
All right, the championship game, the final game after 36 years on ABC television with the Professional Bowlers Tour.
That was until the year 2000, when 3 former Microsoft employees purchased the PBA for, as the British say, pittance, and completely reworked the league. According to an ABC News article and The Bad Boy of Bowling mini-documentary done by ESPN in 2016, they told players like Pete to basically go nuts.
Steve Miller pretty much gave me a green light to do whatever I wanted on TV. He said, you pretty much say off on TV and I won't find you.
The best thing about rock bottom is that you can only go up. This is where the Pete everyone knows today really came out, and he came out flying. By 2001, PDW was back in action, and his most bombastic win came at the price of fellow professional Steve Wilson's pride. Steve bowled an impressive 242, but Pete... Steve was shooting side by side with him for a while, but after the 5th frame, it all came crashing down. And Pete took advantage to the delight of the crowd.
What a start! 6 in a row.
By then it was over. Pete had all the momentum, and the only thing that would stop him from winning was himself, and that damn 4-pin. Afterwards, Pete began his second era of dominance, winning 2 more US Open titles in 2004 and in 2007, as well as a myriad of other tournaments during this time. He also really meant it when he said he was going to let loose, because after rolling a strike, sometimes he would give the crowd something else to look at.
Now going for the front 8 in a row. Oh yeah! He's getting closer.
In the viral clip where he yells at the photographer, standing next to him is a lady with a PDW poster, and it's adorned with Pete doing his signature pose. If you're yelled at by Pete while he's bowling or at the receiving end of a tirade, it's the bowling equivalent of being bathed in holy water. The person at the receiving end of Pete's wrath at the 69th US Open may have other thoughts when it was all said and done, and I'm not talking about the other bowlers.
Rolling Stone!
The word open is not just there for show. Anyone can qualify for a spot to try and win the coveted major championship. Qualifying for the US Open is held at designated spots throughout the country, and thousands of amateurs every year try and get on television. If you think you're good enough, you're more than welcome to attempt to roll it with the big boys. If you try that though, you're in for the toughest test of bowling on the planet, as the PBA makes players go through the ringer, as getting to the show requires over 50 games played under your belt to even qualify. And this is with an oil pattern designed to slingshot your ball into the gutter. The oil on the lanes does way more to your ball than people think. And again, I'm going to reference golf again because the similarities are just uncanny. Reading the oil pattern on the lane is almost exactly like reading breaks of a putt. The 2024 US Open at Pinehurst was one of the most interesting in a long time because of the shape of the greens. The greens are like if you were putting on top of a turtle shell.
Tug just a little bit, left center of the green.
Gonna sit? No.
And that is similar to what the oil does on the lanes at the US Open. If your ball strays too far to one side of the lane or the green, it just falls off.
Brunswick's own Carol Air, North Brunswick, New Jersey is the site. With Randy Peterson, I'm Gary Thorne. This is the toughest stop for these bowlers.
The main event starts when the final 4 bowlers have qualified, and they are placed in their respective seeds depending on how well they bowled in qualifying. Our main man is the number 4 seed and playing first against Ryan Schaefer, someone who he has played against and beaten in a US Open 24 years before in 1988.
Pete Weber, 25 years old. Youngest in the field, 21-year-old Ryan Schaefer, 5'7", 135.
And Schaefer's underway. Now we kick it off with a couple of strikes.
Right off the bat, Pete shows off the energy he's bringing to the match after getting a generous messenger that hits the 10-pin.
We're underway for the U.S. Open. And he got it.
That's a bad man right there, Gary. He once killed 2 stones with 1 bird.
But into the second frame, both Ryan and Pete leave nasty splits. And Pete even whiffs completely, leaving him in open frame early in the match. Pete recovers with a strike in the 3rd frame, and for the first time, what do you hear when the pins drop?
Dows.
He's locked in.
Ah, yes, the orchestral musings of Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Truly a classic, and by now, it's commonplace. But it's still so fun to hear. But starting in the 4th frame, after Pete bowls another strike, he looks to his left and begins berating a member of the crowd.
Boy, he had that one lined up. Really? See? It's just too bad he's not a showman.
Gary and Randy don't seem to comment on it as they need to transition into Pete's pregame speech about the US Open. Schaefer doesn't seem to be bothered by the person in the crowd. Maybe the person is only antagonizing Pete. So far through 6 frames, Pete has not bowled all that well. While he has the double in the 3rd and the 4th, he missed the pocket in 2 others and left 1 completely open. Luckily, Ryan Schaefer hasn't been doing much better, but things will need to fall Pete's way if he wants to win. Knowing this, Pete missing the 10-pin on another spare doesn't help him at all.
Stay on.
And it went off, he knew.
He begins to call himself names and gets angry at the pins and at the way he threw the ball. But if you notice the blonde woman to his left sitting right behind him, that's Tracy Weber, Pete's wife, and she's not worried for him. In fact, she's laughing. It's almost like she knows what's going to happen. The timing couldn't be better because directly after that, Ryan misses the pocket and goes directly into the 3-pin and leaves a nasty split coming back. A split he does not make.
Nope. Back up.
No.
All of a sudden, PDW is back in it. By the 8th frame, Pete has claimed the lead outright.
Finish here, get a lead, put the pressure on. He does.
Right there. Don't miss.
One change that is remarked by Randy Peterson, Pete seems to play a lot better when he has something to be mad about. However, Schaefer matches him on the 8th and the 9th, meaning that the 3 balls thrown in the 10th will decide the quarterfinal match. Ryan missed the Brooklyn on the first ball, but recovers with a spare to stay alive.
Schaefer, gotta have it.
Got it. So just decent count here.
But with the miss on the fill ball in the last, realistically leaves him too far behind to win, and with Pete striking on his first ball in the 10th, moves on.
That was for you, Rob Stone. A Pete Weber ham bone.
The semifinal match is against Jason Belmonte. As of 2012, Jason might be the hottest bowler on tour. He won 2009 Rookie of the Year, the 2011 Players Championship, and later in the year will record the 21st ever televised 300 game. He also shows why he's the most dangerous player in the game from the first frame. While Pete does strike well in frame 1,
about that last night, talking about it. Let's see how it goes. He's on.
Jason rolls it so fast that he can be slightly off from the pocket and still bury it. This is even more apparent in frame 2 when he throws one even further outside and still strikes with a trip on the 4-pin. While Jason was burying 2 strikes, Pete was having issues with both the pins and the return of the disruptive member of the audience.
Patience, patience, patience.
Can you stop moving over there, please?
They keep repeating this offense, and this makes Pete shift into his top gear.
Please stop moving while I'm on my approach. I said, would you please stop moving in my approach?
Not good when you have the...
I don't know what's hard about that to understand.
Right over 600.
You think I'm going to talk when he's getting ready, you're crazy. And he got a strike. After his third strike. Yep. Monty trying to maintain his lead.
With a few mistakes from Belmonte and some key strikes from Weber, by the time we reach the 6th frame, we are all square. Now it comes down to whoever falters first, and in the 8th frame, Pete has his tempo locked in, helped by the aggravation of the person moving between his shots. Belmonte blinks.
First win in a major. Trying to back-to-back strikes. Nope.
A massive 3-10 split, and to add salt in the wounds, he doesn't convert the spare. Pete now has the opportunity to go for the throat, and by God, he does just that with 2 big strikes in the 8th and 9th.
Weber with the lead, trying to extend it. Got it.
He can trip the 4, so can I.
After the strike, not to be shut out. Yeah!
Belmonte's only chance now is to strike out in the 9th and 10th frames. He gets 1.
Jason Belmonte. Got it!
He gets 2.
Keeping his hopes alive. Yes, he does!
He gets 3.
Belmonte. Got it.
He gets... nope.
Jason Belmonte to finish it up.
Oh, no!
That's big. He just lost.
Just missed it!
He leaves the 2 and 8 pins. All Pete needs to do now is throw 1 strike, and he moves on to face Mike Fagan in the championship match. Belmonte, as of 2025, holds the record for most major wins in PBA history with 15. The guy won 3 Masters titles in a row, solidified the popularization of the two-handed bowling style, and will undoubtedly go down in history as probably the greatest bowler to ever roll one down the 42 feet. But these numbers are skewed because we have hindsight from our comfortable perch in the year 2025. In 2012, he was only competing in his 3rd US Open ever, was celebrating the birth of his first child, and had the confidence of his wife back in Australia that told him he was going to win the US Open. In a perfect world, this would be the perfect origin for a first US Open win, beating a legend and winning a major championship at the same time.
But this is not a perfect world.
Weber trying to advance. A strike here would set him up. He got it. So, Pete Weber.
Now the number 4 seeded Pete Weber faces the number 1 seeded Mike Fagan. I made all that hubbub about Jason Belmonte in the last match, and while yes, Jason was the hottest player in the game at the time, and will become probably the best player ever when it's all said and done, Mike Fagan has had an amazing start to his 2012 as well. Qualifying for the top seed in the US Open is a great feat for sure, but this is coming off a major win at the 2012 Masters as well. Yes, the PBA also calls its first major of the year the Masters. But in the eyes of the bowling world, Fagan was just as likely to have the tournament of his life and maybe a season for the books as anyone was. As the final match gets started, Pete seems to have scared the entire crowd half to death. No one makes a single sound. Gary Thorne even calls this out.
Notice how quiet we are. You're on the 18th green. He's earned that.
And we're underway.
Despite the absolute stunning silence, he very nearly leaves a horrifying split in the first frame. Luckily, he gets some pin action and is left with an easy 4-pin pickup. Fagan also leaves pins on the table in the first frame, but converts it just the same, and they remain even through frame number 1. Fagan breaks the tie with the first strike in frame 2. Pete in the second frame changes to another ball. This is because he feels it's a better fit for him on this right lane. The oil breaks down in such a way that to him it feels like it's a smart choice to change into a fresh ball. He thinks maybe that this ball will react the way he wants it down the lane. It seems to work because he throws a damn near perfect ball, but it again misses the 10 pin. He looks over to the person in the audience who seems to be giving him a hard time and points at him. The camera still can't identify the person. He keeps pointing in the direction of a bunch of young kids in the front row and staring them down. There is a theory that the bowling roundheads have been cooking up, that the person giving Pete so much trouble in this match doesn't actually exist, and that he made them up to create an outside enemy to focus and conquer. This correlates with the mystery and explains why they can't seem to identify who it is and why they haven't been moved. But this anonymous bowling heckler will come up later. Fagan follows up his strike in the second with another one in the third.
Mike Fagan, the number 1 seed.
Got him.
And before he rolls his ball for the 4th frame, they cut to his talking head about what it means to play as the 1 seed in the US Open. And I'll just let him speak for himself. Yeah, I feel so bad for Mike in this because his words were not aired at all. And it must have been pretty heartfelt because when they transitioned back to the game, Gary says this.
Everything. Absolutely everything.
Fagan leaves a 10 pin in the 4th, leaving room for Pete to make up some ground, and he does.
Found that one.
With a strike in his 4th and a spare in his 5th, this combined with Fagan leaving 2 in the 5th lowers his lead to 9.
Got to make these spares.
Fagan loses his lead, although he seems to recover well with a strike in the 6th, and it seems to be a good time too because Pete cannot seem to get the ball to react well on this right lane and leaves 2 in the 6th frame, and they are now all square heading into the 7th. And both bowlers would not miss this chance. This is where PDW pulls out his WMDs.
Yes. So he gets his first strike on that lane and just his second. Big bend and got him. Ooh, thank you.
The 8th shows some more fireworks because Fagan throws a slightly imperfect ball and leaves a 10. Seeing this, Pete comes up and throws out one of these.
Let's got a hook. Oh, baby, yeah!
He knew it.
And for the second time in the championship match, he takes the lead. And with another strike in the 9th, Pete saves himself from being eliminated sitting on the bench. Fagan cannot win just by bowling. He now needs Pete to make mistakes in the 10th. And with his play in the last few frames, that seems unlikely. Can Fagan overcome the pressure?
Focus, focus.
Fagan slips in the 9th, but he's not done.
Whoever finally looks up, watching Fagan, can he do it?
Yes, he can. Wow.
Fagan finishing it up.
With a strike. 3 in a row.
As if the pressure wasn't on Pete enough, Fagan shows up in the 10th and buries all 3 shots. Pete walks up to his first in the 10th, and almost taunting him is that ringing 10 on the right lane. However, he's still in the driver's seat. He just needs to make sure to convert the spare, which he does.
Thought he had that.
Got to make it.
For the spare. He's missed one, but not that one.
And now here we are, the moment we all know and love. But let's take another step back real quick. I've told the tale of PDW, his trials and tribulations throughout his career. But why does he do what he's about to do? Because again, you know what he's about to do. I see two paths, two theories. Number one, Pete is a showman. He wears his heart on his sleeves, but he loves working the crowd. He loves to perform. Hell, he even has a scoring song that is the theme of a wrestler. He's a bowler and a thespian, to use a term. Pete knows what people want to see, and it's him being himself, loud, bombastic, and rude. I think this is the most likely reason. But let's put our sports journalism tinfoil hats on for a second and take a look at this. Pretend that you are Pete Weber. You are a bowling prodigy, having the best bowling coach on the planet. That coach being your own father, whom you love unconditionally. Your father is also known as the godfather of the lanes and is loved by everyone. In 1979, you get to be on his level, but you're not like your father in one key aspect. Your manners. You are a brash young boy with a temper, and people do not like that one bit. People keep comparing you to your father, and not in a good way. You keep winning, but people don't respect the way you win. Who do they think they are, you think to yourself? Who do you think you are? The pressure gets to you, and you fall to the many vices of the world, drugs, alcohol, and fame. People see this, and it only fuels their fire and hatred for you. You think again, who do you think you are? I'm out here bowling for you, and you hate me for it. For 20 years, you bowl for them, and they criticize you the entire time. You have a few fans, but on the whole, you're disliked. And eventually the league goes under, and you think about retiring. It really ate Pete up inside. But then in 2000, bowling was brought back. Then they tell Pete specifically, hey, if you be you, we can make money. So you can curse and be loud and boisterous all you want. If it helps the league's dime, you can be you. I referenced the ESPN Plus documentary they did in 2016 a bit ago, and in it they're mostly positive about how the league was brought back. But looking at it in hindsight, it looks super greedy and extremely unfair to Pete. They act like they gave Pete a second chance, but you can tell they were not doing it out of the kindness of their heart. They were only doing it to make money. Again, who do they think they are? Only when the league says it's okay. Now years have passed, and some kid is berating you throughout this entire tournament, and this isn't just any tournament. This is a tournament to surpass the legends of the game, to have something that is entirely yours. No one else on the planet can say that they have done what you're about to do, and this little snot kid is pestering you to mess up. What makes a winner? Winners don't worry about what people think of them. You're not worried about what will happen if you miss the shot or make a mistake. You're just focused on what you need to do to make it happen.
This is the tournament I think everybody wants to win, and to win it a fifth time, I mean, that would just be like, wow, man, I did something that Dick Weber and Don Carter didn't do.
Real winners have already won in their minds hours, days, and even months ahead of time. Knowing Pete, though, I think the only thing going through his mind during the shot was, I know how I'm going to shut this damn kid up.
Strike to claim it, a strike to claim it, and he